Hi, everyone. Joseph Groban with Dr. Peter Salerno. He has just published a book, Living Well After 65, Blowing Through the Stop Sign of Old Age. It's on Amazon right now. You can find it there. And we're having a series of dialogues where we go into some of the issues explored in the book. And in particular, Dr. Salerno, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that today is my birthday. I am
Happy birthday,
starting.
Joe.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. And, I think back, I was 31 maybe when you and I first started working together. 31. Can you
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I know.
Uh,
And you were a spry early 60s.
yeah,
Yeah,
true. Yeah.
long time
Yeah.
together for sure. But 63rd year I'm starting, right on the precipice of the demographic your book speaks to. What can people my age or just turning 65 do to get ready for what hopefully is a very long next chapter? What are the top three things you would say, Dr. Salerno?
First of all, you're stepping into the 60s, okay, and beyond. Now, in a session that you and I had before this, okay, we pointed out the fact that something like uh, 11, 12,000 people are retiring every day, stepping into this new world. And it's very, very different from the world within which they've been. In the world in which they've been, they've had a job, let's say, that they've gone to every day. It's been well structured for them. They knew what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. And then suddenly, almost overnight, they begin moving into a whole new dimension, which lies before us now in a way that never was there before. Now, because of the marvels of medicine, we're living 20, 30, 40 years longer than we normally would have.
Hmm.
65 used to be the marker moment. You turned 65, you lived a few more years, and then you were dead, unfortunately. Okay. Now you got a whole lifetime ahead of you. So as you begin to enter the 60s, the first thing that really you got to look at is this is a period of new transitions in the way that you've never gone through a transition before. Okay. And what is required when you go through a period of decision? How do you define a period of transition? One of the important things is the fact that you are actually redefining who you are. You're beginning to look at your life and saying to yourself, okay, wow, I've got a lot of life ahead of me. Now, what do I want to do with that? And what kind of changes do I need in order to be able to make in order to be able to do it well? And one of the metaphors I like for this that I think really applies well is the circus and the trapeze artists. Okay. Here you got these magnificent athletes who are operating at about 50 or 60 feet above the ground. Okay. And on one end, you've got a woman on a small little seat that she has to, or a bar that she's going to swing out into the middle of this space. On the other end, you got a catcher, and she'll swing out, okay, which is kind of like old world. Then at one brief moment, she's got to let go. And you're looking down below, wow, all right. And that guy, that catcher on the other side, has got to come out exactly, the timing's got to be exactly precise. She twists around in the air, catches onto him, or he catches her, and onto the other side. But there's that brief moment in between, okay? And so when you stop to think about moving into 65, you're in that brief moment in between old world and new world. And the question becomes one of, okay, how do I define myself? Where do I find the resources necessary to begin to figure out where I want to be and what I want to do? Now, for most of us, the first 6, 8 months, not a problem. Lots of projects we got that we want to do and this, that, get that done, okay? But then the world begins to change. What do I do after I got all those little home projects done, okay? How do I figure out what lies in front of me when, in fact, meaning and purpose are so incredibly important? And without that, what we do is we dwindle away, we shrivel away. We have to have meaning and we have to have purpose. And now there's nobody defining it for us. We got to do it for ourselves. What are some of the steps that we can take to do that? Certainly, one of them is to sit down and start talking with somebody about this. It can be a close friend, it could be a therapist, it could be a number of persons who are out there, okay, who have some knowledge, some information as to how to go through these transitions. And let me make one suggestion that might be helpful for people. In your lifetime, before 65, you went through a number of transitions. You probably went from high school to college, or you went from high school to your first job, okay? Or you went from being single to being married. Or maybe you took a job, you had a job and you went to a new place, a new community, a new part of the country. All of those involve transitions. So one of the things you can do is you can go back and ask yourself, how did I make that transition successfully? What were the steps that I took that enabled me to go from single life to marriage, or to take that first job that was offered to me? How did I make those transitions? And then sit down, look at the positive steps that you took. Okay. And I would suggest you do this with several of those. Okay. Pull them out, then put them down on a piece of paper, and then look at that from the perspective of, okay, now I'm in another transition. How can I use what I really was successful doing in the past, use it today in order to move forward?
That'll take some, I think, really deep self-examination, won't it? Because if I look back at the transitions I experienced getting to where I am now, I have to say none of them were really intentional. I never thought about them as, gosh, I need to be skillful in this transition, going to school, getting a job, being married. I got through them haphazardly. So to do what you're saying, I would have to sit down and think, gosh, what were the challenges I faced then? And what did I, without knowing I was making a course correction, do to better enter those worlds?
Mhm.
Correct?
Correct. True.
Okay.
And remember, what's so important is whenever you're starting out on any new journey, it's really important to know where you're going, how you're going to get there, what are the resources you need in order to be able to get there, okay? To make sure that that start is a good start. Because if we mess up on that start, okay, on that beginning step, we can really get off track, get off the rails, cause ourselves a lot of difficulties, all right? So you really want to take the time, and here's the important issue here, the time to do this. Now, this is going to take some time. It's going to take some self-reflection, but it's really important to do everything you can to get that right.
Mhm.
Because if you get a good start, um, I've been in athletics for a long, long time. I was a sculler, racing, crew racing, okay? One of the most important things in racing was that initial start. Getting off to a really good start saves you a lot of problems down the river, okay? In my case, to stick with the metaphor. So that start and talking to somebody about that, okay? Bouncing it off, or maybe it's your spouse, or bouncing it off a friend, or sitting down with, as I said, a third party to really look at, okay, uh, does this make sense? Now, the other thing that you want to look at that I think is important for these transitions has to do with deferred possibilities. Probably in all those working years that you had, those, whatever company you were working with, okay, you had to make a living. There were lots of things that came across your thoughts, or through came to you that you would really have liked to have done, but you couldn't do it because you had to make sure that you had an income. Um, Take some time, go back over those. Look at some of those deferred possibilities. See if there's anything in those now that you would really like to do. And now we move into the metaphor of exploration. Gives you an opportunity to explore new possibilities. On the one hand, it's going to be somewhat, what's the word? I wouldn't want to use the word scary, but you're looking at a lot of unknowns, and people don't like unknowns, okay? For a whole variety of reasons. At the same time, you're looking at the possibilities for new growth, new development, new understandings, an exciting future. So there are lots of good stuff. There's lots of good stuff in here for you to be able to do, achieve, or accomplish. It's going to take some time. Take the time that you need in order to figure out some of these things. And what we're talking about right now is here's a way to do it. Here are some of the steps that you can take. Go back, look at some of these transitions, put them down on a piece of paper, see what worked for you, what didn't work for you, discard, see if any of those resources would really make sense for you now, put them to work.
Yeah, it seems to me that something you touched on a minute ago was pretty critical, and that is the word meaning, right? So when I went to school, I had an inkling of what I wanted to do. When I got married, I understood, uh, well, at least I had a vision for a long marriage, healthy, mutually satisfying children. And those meanings kind of came with the activities themselves. As we look at retirement age and what goes beyond, it seems to me that a huge struggle, just when we need it the most, is to figure out, well, what do I want that period to be, right? It can't be, well, the plane is landing and I've got to put my tray table up and my seat up. It's got to be more than that. What would you say to that?
Okay, so all right, one of the important things here that you're really looking at as you go through this transition um, are two words, emptiness and meaning, okay? Because let's say that on your job, it built in friendships for you, it built in connections for you, okay? Now you're stepping out of that world and what you may likely feel is a sense of emptiness. Suddenly you don't have those connections. And and so one of the important tasks here, it seems to me, would be to look at this question of, okay, how do I fill that emptiness? And what am I going to fill that with? Can I make new friends? Can I make new connections? Are there people out there now that I can connect with that for whatever reasons I haven't been able to do in the past? Okay. And with emptiness, okay, once I begin to get that piece in place, okay, then as these relationships begin to develop, meaningfulness then begins to come into the picture. And what's important about that is without meaning, one of the things we really experience is a great deal of anxiety. And so then that would bring into the question of, okay, how do I deal with that anxiety? All right, and we can talk about that later. But I think what we're really talking about here is, okay, in the past, a lot of this meaning in life has been defined for me. Now I'm in a position where I'm looking at a whole world ahead of me in which I am going to have to be responsible more and more for providing that meaning, for providing that purpose. What is it that is really going to be important for me to be able to do in those areas?
The thought of retiring, I must tell you, terrifies me because, for better or worse, and probably for worse, I have intertwined so much of my meaning with my career. And I've joked with my wife that I don't ever plan on retiring. And I think that aversion to retirement is because I'm confronting the very void you describe, right? I am very comfortable, to go back to your trapeze metaphor, swinging from that first bar. And the idea of trying to find someone on the other side, in this case, perhaps that meaning, terrifies me because I know I'll fixate or perhaps fall into that gap where I have to let go of one and grab the other. For people who are intertwined with their jobs in terms of meaning, what kinds of meaning are available, right? So, I mean, you mentioned a couple of them, perhaps family, friends. Um, it's a whole new skill set, right? What can they do, and how can they or I have the strength to turn and grab that pair of hands and not just fall down to the net?
Okay, so step one, self-reflection. Step one has to do with, and again, now keep in mind, two important dimensions of life are space and time. Space and time, right? At this particular point, your space is pretty good. By space, I mean you probably have a home, a place to live, space within which to operate. Now we're talking about time. Time becomes much more important in our lives, how we handle our time, how we deal with our time, because we now know that more so than ever before, time has its, excuse me, time has its limitations. So taking deliberately taking time to sit down and ask ourselves the questions such as, okay, um, and I'll speak now personally, okay? Um, what is it that's going to interest me and help me make it through this period of transition into something else that perhaps has more depth to it, okay? In my case, I'd always wanted to be able to speak good Italian. I think I joked with you at one point in time that my dad came from Italy. He wanted us to speak good English. So what we learned was bad English because he didn't speak good English, where I could have learned good Italian, all right? Okay. So, but anyways, I went back to school to learn, and I got myself a teacher who really taught me good Italian. I also wanted to music. I thought I always enjoyed music. Okay, so I learned how to pick up an instrument, start playing an instrument. All right. Now, once again, those require teachers. And so one of the things that I think that's very important is if it is all possible for you as a retiree to have a good teacher in your life, do it. Do not go throughout your life without a good teacher. They're so beneficial. I can't tell you. Joe, I couldn't read a note. All I could see was a little black dot on a piece of paper. Now I can see that black dot on a piece of paper translated into a note, translated into muscle memory, translated into actually being able to move my left hand, my right hand. How you do all of that from a little black note is just, to me, absolutely miraculous. All right. So what I'm thinking is that you have to do, I think it's really important to do some self-reflection. What are some of these deferred possibilities that I had thought about, couldn't do them, but now I've got the possibility for being able to do them during this, particularly as you go through this transitionary period. And these are kind of neat things to do, which give you then a foundation for being able to step off into something else, maybe that's even more depthful, more important for you as you begin to put these pieces together for yourself. So I think the first thing is self-reflection. Okay. Then I think the second thing is once you begin to figure out this is really meaningful for me. Pick up the phone, call University of Louisville, call JCC, get yourself a course in it. Okay, the cost of education for a person who's in their 60, 65 probably is going to be a little bit less. In some instances, you can audit these classes and cost you nothing.
Mhm.
Okay, once again, the metaphor for exploration is a good one here because you're exploring new and different possibilities. Open yourself up to a number of possibilities. Get out of rigid thinking, get out of rigid patterns. I've always done it this way, so therefore that's the way I'm always going to do it. No, what you're really saying is I'm living in the past, always done it this way, and I'm not going to move into the future. If I've always done it this way and always feel like I've got to do it this way, you're in trouble. So what we're talking about is, okay, what are the new possibilities now for myself? What can I explore? Use that metaphor of exploration to look at a variety of possibilities To use another metaphor, taste a little bit of this, taste a little bit of that. What do I like? Well, if I really don't like that, spit it out. Don't chew it, don't swallow it. Get away from it. But there may be some things that really appeal to you. And the way to do that is, once again, take a class. Okay. That would give you something to do. It would begin to build structure into your life, because one of the things you're going to need is structure. Psych 101. Structure binds anxiety. Say it again. Structure binds anxiety. If I'm working with a client and they come in and they're loosey-goosey all over the place, the first thing I want to do is start building structure into their lives. Okay, let's get this done at first thing in the morning. Let's do this at the second thing, the third thing, the fourth thing, the fifth thing, okay? Because that'll start binding their anxiety. It gives them direction. It gives them something to do. Somebody comes in that is so uptight they can't think or move. Let's loosen those structures up.
Mhm.
Okay? So it depends upon the context as well. What's the context that we're living in? The context that we're dealing with. Sometimes I should say something, sometimes I should keep my big mouth shut. How do I know when to do one or the other, right?
Right. Right. Um, so we started this conversation with wanting to have three things. And if I'm tracking with you, and I hope I'm not shoehorning us into my perspective on this, yeah, one would be kind of figure out, you know, who you are and what your life is now. The second would be, what do I want it to be, right? To be intentional about defining this next chapter. And then the third thing would be how to get there, right?
Mhm.
And perhaps one thing I found helpful at various points in my life is to really think about a mission statement and a vision and then a set of values, right? So, I defined my mission as wanting, to do A, B, and C at a very broad level. I wanted to, help, vulnerable children and animals, which is, of course, my vocation right now. And another mission was to be a positive influence on my life. And then I converted that into a vision, which makes the mission very practical because you can help, let's say, animals in many different ways, from volunteering at a shelter to doing as I do, working for a nonprofit. Helping people, well, that might take the form of volunteering, whatever. So the vision would convert the mission into very practical steps. And then what are my values? What do I value? And we'll all have different values. My wife, for example, her value is very family oriented, right? I mean, she's always doing things with her family. I'm more task oriented. A value for me is getting certain professional things done. Now, when she listens to this and she hears that my value, one of them is task orientation, she's probably going to laugh because she'll look around the front yard and in the garage and say, where's the evidence of your task orientation? It's coming, honey. I will manifest it one of these days. But most people, I don't think, look at their lives like that, right? We live them rather accidentally. So to know where we want to go, we have to know where we are, right? If we want to go to Kings Island, the amusement park in Cincinnati, well, it makes a lot of difference whether we're in Louisville, Kentucky, or whether we're in Chicago. So, again, I feel like I'm putting words in your mouth and you're the expert. So at the end of this, I'm going to ask you if I'm crazy or not. But we've got to know where we are and then have a vision for where we want to go. And then to figure out, well, if I want to do things like be able to play an instrument, well, that entails, well, what instrument, who's going to teach me, what kind of music, for example. And then to begin to wash, rinse, repeat on all of those things going forward. So, am I crazy, or is that in essence what we're saying?
Yeah. What you're asking, though, what you're referring to is something that's indeed very practical and incredibly demanding. Okay. I was an Air Force chaplain for a number of years. Okay. Every unit in the Air Force has a mission, very explicitly stated. Every airman has a mission, explicitly stated. So, for example, when the Presbyterian Church asked me if I invited me to work nationally with Vietnam veterans returning into society, right? So I decided to go up to Indiana. There's a retreat there where, believe it or not, Paul Tillich, one of the greatest Protestant theologians in our country ever, probably the greatest Protestant theologian of the 20th century, okay, is buried in Indiana, right? And there's a little chapel there, okay? And so I went up there. I did it a couple of nights, okay, where I sat down as I looked at this new ministry to develop a mission for myself, all right? And the mission that I came up for myself was to assist Vietnam era veterans to re-enter into society in a way based upon self-help, to help them really help themselves, okay? I finally got that down, and I used that mission statement at all times when I was doing that ministry. And I did that ministry for about 7 years. Essentially, I was working with Vietnam veterans. I was working with self-help, helping them to help themselves. That was my goal. Okay, not to do anything for this group in that sense of the word, but really to do everything to support them so that they could stand on their own 2 feet, make their transition into our society, whatever the case might be. So what you're talking about is really an incredibly helpful exercise and very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to put down on a piece of paper in a couple of sentences or less what my goal at this particular point in time is.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard work, Joe. Most people won't do it, but you are absolutely right. If they would do it, it'd be an incredible benefit to them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they only need to do it for the next couple of years or maybe for the next year, but to sit down and say, this is my purpose. This is my goal for this next period of time. All right. As I go through this transition, I want to find this out and focus on that particular issue, not allow themselves to become distracted by every other thing in the universe, because distractions are easy to get pulled into.
Yeah.
I don't know, does that make sense?
Well, I mean, yeah, it makes terrific sense. And perhaps an examination of values needs to come before everything else, because I think the values drive the mission, right? If I didn't value going back to animals, that wouldn't show up in my mission. But to really sit down and say, well, golly, what have I inadvertently been manifesting as important to me? And then I think you have to do a certain decision. Well, is that a value that warrants sustenance? Do I want to feed that value? And those that are feed worthy or worthy of sustenance, I think then what kind of mission comes out of those values? Now, as a testimony to the distraction component, one of my missions has been to support people in recovery from drug and alcohol addiction, which stems from my own personal experiences. I have let my relatively new marriage distract me from that. Certainly one can't do everything in life,
Yeah, right.
but I don't like that I've let it happen as a matter of course, without intentionality. If I needed to forsake one of my mission components, I wish I'd been more intentional about it. But if we examine our values and we convert that into a mission that is doable, that we have the time to do, even if it takes talents we can pick up, then it becomes a matter of, well, how do I do that? And part of that would be getting these new tools, right? So, if I want to, and I'm leaning on this a lot, but if I want to help animals, well, then, I've got to figure out, well, in what capacity can I do that? I'm not going to be able to do it in a shelter because I'm just not the kind of person that would feel comfortable doing that. I don't like poop, Dr. Salerno, and cleaning up after. I don't like that stuff. But I do like communicating, and that's my background and all of that. Well, I'm rambling, I'm afraid. So, not wanting this, video to be too long and to be relatively concise with it, I think I'll summarize and ask for, your additional, final thoughts on it. Step one, where are you? right? What are you demonstrating as values? What talents do I have? And what is important to me as a human being? And then, all right, well, I'm going into this period where maybe my health isn't the same as it has been. My financial resources are perhaps better than they have been. And then I may have more time on my hands. Well, what mission do I want to play? And then how do I get ready for that? Where's the parachute if I'm going to be a paratrooper? Where I don't know, whatever metaphors you might use.
Joe, let me, you touched a thought, touched an idea off in my thinking when you use this word value, okay? Now, if I may, a lot of people don't understand that feeling and value are connected. A lot of people, in my practice, I've often warned people, be careful about your feelings. Oh, I feel this, I feel that, and they go off on a feeling, and boy, do they regret that afterward because they really haven't thought the feeling out. When they talk about a feeling, they're really talking about their values. When a person says, "Oh, I have this feeling," let me encourage them to translate that feeling into, "I value this." If they make that little simple transition into going from that feeling to this is what I value, it gives them a whole new perspective on how to respond to that particular issue in that particular moment. They're less likely to go off on a tangent that gets them into difficulty. Whereas if they can say to themselves, instead of saying, well, I feel this or that, I value this. Oh, is this something that I should act on?
Yeah.
Is this something I should think through?
Right.
Because a lot of times we'll say, oh, I feel this, and off they go.
Right.
And boy, I've seen people go right off the edge of a cliff with that one all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So making that simple little thoughtful transition can really help them in being able to much more clearly define whether I should do X, Y, Z, whether I should hold off, wait a minute, think this through, because this is something I value and I don't want to hurt that. And I don't want to damage that. I want to make sure that I keep that one in good stead. Okay. So
it's so hard to look at ourselves with anything that approaches objectivity. We'll never, I think, be able to look at ourselves or anything objectively. But one of the fascinating things I try and do, if something bothers me or delights me, I try and think about, well, what does that say about me as a person?
Right.
So, for example, my wife has a habit when she comes back from the store, if she's coming back from the other direction, she will park the wrong way facing into traffic in front of the house. And Dr. Salerno, that drives me freaking crazy, right? I finally had to say, well, why does it bother me so much that she parks facing traffic instead of with the flow of traffic on that side of the road? And I have an overly strong sense of law and order and the way things should work. And then once I understand that that's my value, maybe I'm then able to do a little bit of what you're saying, and that's contextualize it. Like, really, how important is this particular breach of what I believe to be something we all ought to do? In my house, when they crack an egg, Dr. Salerno, they don't put the eggshell in the garbage. They put that eggshell back in the carton with the good eggs. I can't tell you the extent to which that drives me crazy, but if I understand that what's being offended is a particular value, law and order, things need to work A, B, C, D, then maybe I can mitigate my ire a little bit.
An addendum to your issue about parking there for wrong direction. My wife has done the same thing. Okay?
Yeah.
Until they gave some tickets to people on the street for doing that. Guess what? You don't do it anymore.
I don't do it anymore. I know. And I've actually noticed that when I've come to your house before. And I think, my wife is not the only one who does that. So I live across the bridge in Indiana, but Certainly I'd never call the police on her, but it wouldn't hurt my feelings if she got a ticket for doing that. And that's horrible. That's the extension of that value there. But you've got to look at yourself. What was it? Aristotle, I can't remember who said the unexamined life is not worth living.
Right.
And I think there's nothing more difficult and yet nothing more worthwhile than really looking at yourself on a sheet of paper.
And that does take some time.
Yeah.
You got to take time to do that.
Yeah.
You can't just be completely caught up in a horizontal life. We live a horizontal world. Everything is fast food. Quickly get this done. We go through TV shows, serials, like one after the other in a week, okay? You have to do the vertical, you have to do the depth, and the depth takes time.
I like that because a visual metaphor I have for this is, we find ourselves in traffic jams so many times, and it's so frustrating in traffic because you can't always see what the impediment is. You can't really see what's going on.
Yeah, right.
So I like to imagine myself getting in a helicopter and looking at where I am and trying to figure out things from that elevated perspective. And that very much is a very vertical way of doing it. You can't just be going forward. You got to look at yourself top down. All right. Great conversation as always. Thank you. Dr. Peter Salerno Jr., his book, Living Well After 65, barreling, what is it? Running through the stop sign of old age.
Blowing through the
Blowing through the sign. I edited the book. I'm having to market the book, and for some reason today I can't get the title right, but it's on the show notes here. Thank you, Dr. Salerno. We'll do another one of these in a couple of weeks, and let's talk about anxiety next time. I mean, it seems like the whole world is in the grip of anxiety right now.
Or depression.
Or depression, closely related, aren't they?
The World Health Organization now puts depression as number one, to being the number one issue that debilitates people in our Western culture.
All right, we'll come back in a couple of weeks for that. Thank you, Dr. Salerno.